Hello, you are tuning into Lotify, the MMU SIE Law podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Multimedia University Special Interest Group Boutique. Once again, thank you for tuning into Lotify. My name is Su.
My name is Dharshini and we will be the host of this episode.
So, on today's episode, we would like to highlight the topic of esports law. Is it really a thing? And with us today, we have Mr. Richard Wee, who is a sports lawyer from Richard Wee Chambers to give us an insight on the world of esports law. Welcome, Mr. Richard.
Thank you, so thank you, Dharshini. Also, thank you to Emily and Nabiha for having me here today. I was quite surprised to receive your invite because the topic of esports law is not a very common and not very popular topic. But I will do what I can today to share whatever knowledge I have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Richard. So before we begin, of course, we have to thank you for joining us in this sharing session. It is truly an honor to us. Now, Mr. Richard, do you mind just sharing some of your experience generally in esports law?
Well, that's a good question. Because that is really what happened with me in esports. It's all about the experience. Truth be told, I didn't plan to become an esports lawyer. I think at the beginning of this conversation, before the recording, I think you heard me saying that I'm almost 50 years old, and I stumbled upon esports by chance, simply because I was doing a little bit of sports law. Back in 2016, about 6 years ago, my legal team and I noticed the development of cyber games and computer games, especially when the name of the games would change to esports. So we then decided to do some research and conduct some article writing. We interviewed some fellow esports stakeholders, and then develop an understanding in the framework of what esports is. And then we decided to plan, okay, this is the law for this is law for that. What can we do for this? What can we do for that? So that's how it developed. As for working experience, I've been very fortunate. We've managed to assist some esports teams, some major companies coming into esports, sponsorship, players contracts. We've been involved in the Ministry of Youth and Sports. One of the former sports minister invited us to be part of the blueprint for esports. So we actually helped to draft the blueprint for esports for Malaysia back in 2019, 2020. Then after that, we were also appointed by the state government of Perak back in 2018, 2019 to draft a state enactment. State enactment is like something like act of parliament for the state. So state enactment for esports. We even nearly formed an esports tribunal in Ipoh. If that had happened, that would be the first ever tribunal in the world for esports. But there was a change of government, and I'm not sure whether the new government is still doing that. But that was what I was doing back then in 2018 to 2019. And
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Richard. Every disputes regarding to esports will be tried in tribunal instead of court, right?
that was the proposal, but it never happened. So at the moment, all the dispute should still go to court.
I see.
Yeah. So to complete my answer to Dharshini, we've also been fortunate to advise international companies, media. We dealt with player transfer. So there's a few times many people don't know, some of the players bought over by one club to another. So our firm was involved in the transaction, similar to football and basketball. You buy and sell players. So we did the same thing for esports. It's been in an interesting area for work. I enjoy doing it.
Okay, now Mr. Richard, so when it comes to esports, right? So do you mind giving us a rough idea on what esport is exactly and Who are the players comprising the sports exactly?
Well, the game itself, esports itself, is of course is games.
Mm.
But unlike non-cyber games, some people call it traditional games. I prefer to call it non-cyber games, like table tennis, badminton. That requires a physical involvement in the games, whereas esports, it's all on cyberspace.
Mm.
Most games which has competitive in nature, where two or more person are competing for an end result, is usually defined as esports. So of course, if you play a certain type of Angry Bird, certain types of mobile games, it's just a game. But if
Mm.
there is a competitive element where, let's say, the four of us are competing in the game, three of us are competing in the game, then it can be defined as esports. So that's how they first ascribe the definition of uh, esports to a certain game. Number one, players. Who are the players? So of course, these are the people who take part in the game. I think the popular ones are Dota 2. Now Valorant is very popular. Mobile Legends is big in Malaysia. So these are the kind of games involved, and we have many people playing it. So those are the players involved in the game.
So as
Okay.
long as it is competitive and tournament in nature, right?
I wouldn't say so long as I would. What I'm saying is that if the game has a competitive nature with
Mm.
an end product, that means there must be a winner. Two of us, we may end up playing each other, but if there's no winner, it's okay. Some games is just playing
Mm.
with each other, but there must be a certain winner. Then that game may become esports. So that's why not all computer games become esports. If you notice, not all.
Oh, I see.
So, Mr. Richard, so with the pandemic situation that we had from 2020, what do you think of the rise in esports?
That's a really good commercial question. So what happened, Dharshini, is that when we had the unfortunate lockdown, and it's very sad. Many people have perished. We have lost uh, millions of lives around the globe. A lot died. It's very sad to see people, you know, losing their lives that way, unexpectedly this way. But for esports, despite the tragedy, they have managed to sustain themselves, and simply because they are internet based. And as you recall, 2 years back, I think some of you probably were just finishing school. We were all online all the time, and
Yes.
even if you look at it, our behavior has changed. 2 3 years ago, nobody will buy things using e-wallet. Now e-wallet is so popular. Uh, People now buy products through online shopping. 3 years ago, you probably still drive to a supermarket to buy stuff. So esports have managed to develop very quickly because by nature and character, they've always been cyber games. So there was nothing for them to evolve and change. They just became very, very popular. And when all of us were locked down at home, many people took to games as a way of release and a way to escape the tragedy that was happening in the world.
Yeah. Relieve the stress lah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sure there are do's and don'ts every player is required to comply with during the tournaments, right? So, Mr. Richard, so can you share with us the tournament hosting rules, regulations, and management?
That's a good question. So the thing now is that one of the biggest challenge, let me start from the top first, before we
Mm.
go to the tournament rules,
Yeah,
is that
sure.
most tournament rules are inconsistent.
Mm.
Simply because we do not have a some sort of a governance to ensure a universal rule which apply to everybody for that game. So, for example, if you play badminton, whether you play it in New York or you play it in Kuala Kubu Baru, it's the same. You know, so that's the thing about it. That kind of game is been governed properly with a world governing body which tells the whole world how to play the game. Whereas for esports, we've had cases around the globe where certain games, certain tournaments are treated in a particular way, and another tournament of the same game is treated in another way. So it's hard for me to tell you so about what are the do's and don'ts. I think if I'm the team manager of an esports team, this is what I'll do. Every time before we go into the tournament, we would have to go through the rules very comprehensively and instruct our players what they can and cannot do. That would be a prudent way. For us, RWC, we sometimes actually advise tournament organizers. So we actually tell them what to draft, what not to draft. We've been engaged for that work before. So that's where I can see that, different tournament got different rules. And that shouldn't be the way. But it's hard to tell people to be universal because we don't have one international governing body to tell the whole world what to do. Like we don't have a FIFA, OCM, IOC, that kind of stuff. We don't have. So anyway, I suppose one of the most important don'ts is to tell the player, don't break the rule, lah. Read the tournament rule properly and don't break the rule. Yeah.
So it does not have a proper legislation to govern, like apply to all competitions, right? Apply all esports game.
Well, since you use the word legislation, so at the moment, the word legislation, of course, assumes the intervention of Parliament. At the moment, we have no particular act of Parliament. In short, there's no statute governing esports. And to be fair, that's because sports is usually self-governing. For example, in Malaysia, you don't have football law. Akta Bola Sepak, we don't have. Because there's a football association of Malaysia, they will govern football. So there's no enactment of that sort, but there are some loose understanding across the world, across the globe, that this is more or less how you play, for example, Dota 2. But then there's one more loose set of law or rules about this is how you play Mobile Legends. But it has not become crystallized into a fixed law yet, or fixed rules yet.
I see. So when it comes to the legal issues of esports, right? So e-doping is one of the legal issues that being faced in the world of esports, right?
Go on.
Mr. Richard, so what is the general principle behind the e-doping? Like how the people cheat in the arena of esports?
Let me share something interesting with you about the word e-doping. Back in 2016, my colleague and I want to name him because he was the one who coined the phrase. Brian Boo. He's now a lawyer on his own. He's a very, very passionate esports lawyer.
Yeah. So, I heard the podcast about him before.
Yeah. So back in 20, with him was 2017, I think, 2017. So we then talked about this issue of people manipulating games and all that. And then he coined the phrase e-doping. But I don't think he's the first person who used the word. I think somebody else used the word. But in Malaysia, I think the very, very first article ever written about e-doping, I think came from him. When he wrote with me. But I give him credit because he was the one who wrote it. And he was just a chambering student at the time. So so that was how we started e-doping. Now the whole world talks about e-doping. So that was back in 2016, 2017. E-doping. E-doping is of course borrowing the word doping in sports law. So let's first understand what is doping in sports law before we go into e-doping. So doping in sports law is where an athlete consumes a certain substance which is listed by the World Anti-Doping Agency as illegal. So, for example, steroids, the most popular substance which has been banned by WADA. Now, take note, steroid is not a bad thing, by the way. If you go to hospital and you're sick, doctors do prescribe steroids. But that's the key. It's meant to be prescribed when you are sick. But some athletes in the past, they have used steroid to become stronger and faster. So WADA, World Anti-Doping Agency, banned that. Now, why do you ban that? Because in sports, the athletes are supposed to compete to see who is better, not who has stronger drugs.
Yeah.
So on that
Agree.
logic, we come into esports. So where let's say you and I go up against each other for Mobile Legends, I should be able to compete with you because I am a better player, not because I manipulated my handphone or my iPad to cheat and play against you. So e-doping is to some extent is a manipulation of the software, manipulation of the code, manipulation of the instruction. So for example, if you play CSGO, and one of the most important thing about CSGO is to aim at people and shoot. There were evidence of people who created a software to be able to see beyond the wall. So as you know, in the CSGO, if you play esports, Counter Strike CSGO, you are hiding behind a wall and you want to shoot somebody, but this person actually can see you because the wall in his computer or her computer is not there, right? So that is clearly cheating lah. So that's how they try to stop it. And usually in tournaments where they all meet in one place, like Dota 2, they meet at the China recently or Europe for the final. They can check the laptops before you play and they'll know whether you're cheating. So e-doping is quite a interesting legal phenomenon, and as a lawyer, we do advise on that every now and then.
Okay, Mr. Richard, so do you mind sharing your personal view as to why you think law students should venture into the legal world of esports?
Well, if you really like esports, Dharshini, and let's say you by nature at night after class, or even in the afternoon when you just finish your lectures, you dive into Valorant, or Fortnite. You're a Fortnite lover. You end up playing, bang bang bang, shoot shoot shoot. You enjoy it. It is your escape, and you turn out to be very good. Let's say, and then you happen to be a lawyer. That's one way to get involved. For the record, I don't play esports. I was quite an ardent. In my time, it was called video game. I'm that old, and we have to go to the arcade and put 20 cents to play the video game. That was in the 1990s. So I was quite good. I could play games like 1943 or Tetris or Street Fighter. That time Street Fighter was very popular. And then I think we had to pay $1 or R2 to play the game. It was very expensive for our time. But when I started studying law, I slowly stopped playing games because I wanted to focus on my career. And at the time, the culture was when you play games, it was an impediment, and it was a young people problem at the time. I remember my mom and dad used to tell me, don't play, you lose your focus, So now I think if my daughter wants to play esports, I say, yeah, go ahead. Play. But I think for that, Dharshini, if you want to get involved into esports, you must have some interest in esports lah. So like for me, while I stopped playing, but because I'm doing sports law, esports was a natural progression for us. I actually downloaded Steam 6 years ago, 2016. I remember I actually downloaded Steam to find out what the hell is Steam, and played Dota 2 at the age of 43 years old. I think I was one of the oldest esports player in the world at the time. So went in, of course, to play with some of my friends. We were trashed by people. Don't know what the hell is happening. Turn around here. It's hilarious. And then I was introduced to Mobile Legends. Playing on a handphone. Moving your phone. It was hilarious. But CSGO was good because CSGO reminded me of my old games that I played 20, 30 years ago. So that was why, Dharshini, I was not too bad for me to get involved in esports. But there are some lawyers I know now, especially your age group, those between the age of 20 to 30 years old, they are very inclined to esports because their whole life they've been playing esports. So when they come into the legal career, many of them go home after work to play esports to lepas tension, so per se. So some of them will call me. He says, Richard, Mr. Richard, how is this? So I just give them some comment, and I know some of them have now become advisors for some esports. So it's a possible area, but you must kind of like the area, lah, Dharshini. If you have no clue about esports, then I would say it'll be tough for you to get involved.
Okay, I see, Mr. Richard. Okay.
Next.
Okay. So one last question, Mr. Richard. So based on your
Go ahead.
opinion, what do you think are the improvements can be done in esports law in Malaysia?
Oh, that's a damn good question. That's a very good question. The industry is so big, so it's a very big industry. I would say it's a multi-million dollar industry. In the world, it's a multi-billion dollar industry. So like when the industry has so much revenue and it generates so much economic income, such industry has to be properly guided or regulated. That means when I say guided, that means there are certain rules that is put in place so that people know what they can and cannot do. Regulated, on the other hand, is where there is a policeman, some sort of a esports ombudsman, hovering over the game and policing it. So I think esports in Malaysia may need some sort of that. We have already in place a sports commissioner. I think many of you do not know that Malaysia have a sports commissioner, and the sports commissioner is based in Bukit Jalil, and that person regulates sports in Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. And that's a wrap on our third episode of Notify. So thank you, Mr. Richard, for your invaluable time and advice. So follow our Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more updates. Be sure to check out our upcoming event episodes where we dive into more compelling matters with other distinguished guests. Till next time, stay safe. Bye-bye.